Young Turks, I'm Nomi Konst. We are here in Atlanta for the final vote. We have gone to all the DNC forums, spent the past 3 months, which felt like a presidential race, traveling around, meeting with the different candidates, interviewing them, talking about the ideas being presented before the DNC after the Democratic Party is effectively at its weakest point since 1920. So they're going through an existential crisis. We are here right now with somebody who was part of the DNC, understands the DNC's rules very well, took a break, came back. Terry Anderson is a DNC member from Vermont.
Yes.
So we were talking a bit beforehand about some of the surprising things you learned when you came back to the Democratic Party. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I've been on the DNC originally back in the late 80s and early 90s. I got involved with the Jackson campaign originally. I took off about 20 years. I went and worked in some other places. And I got reelected this year. I got elected for a term again this year through the Sanders campaign in Vermont. And I was amazed when I came back on. I finally got a list of all the members of how many people I knew from 20 and 30 years ago who'd been on then. I mean, there are plenty of new faces, too, but there's definitely a critical mass of old-time folks who've been here and stay here, and there's a lot of inertia on the DNC that I think is reflected in that fact.
What do you think will happen today?
It's going to be a close vote. I don't think it'll be settled on the first ballot, and I think I'm not making predictions.
We had a call with the DNC a couple of days ago, and they discussed with the press that there could either be paper ballots or electronic ballots. Now, full disclosure, I was a member of the DNC platform committee, and we used electronic ballots. And there were some issues with the electronic ballots, and I've already heard a few issues. Have you heard anything? Because they've moved to electronic ballots.
Right. I think there's a lot of confusion with people of the technology of getting it right. I mean, it's doing paper ballots as a backup. So we're doing both. We're not just doing one, which is appropriate. That's what we want states to do. If they're going to use electronic voting, you need a paper ballot. I think there is going to be confusion and a difficult process at times as people get used to the devices, but it'll allow us to get a faster count if it works. But I suspect in the end we'll have to use the paper ballots to figure out who really wins.
Well, they're telling everybody to go down in 2 minutes. We have 2 minutes to wrap this up. When you look at the membership out here right now, yes, there are a lot of people who have been around for a long time. How many people, I understand the media wants to paint this as a Bernie versus Hillary thing, but how many Bernie-crats do you think are in the room, or progressives? Because there are some progressive Hillary supporters, too.
There's a difference between those two categories. My best estimate right now of the membership of the DNC, probably about a quarter of them are aligned with Bernie. Either they voted for Bernie or sort of came into office on the DNC with Bernie. I think a good 35 to 40% of the DNC is what I would call solid progressives. You got strong people from labor who may have been Hillary backers in 2016. You've got a lot of people in African American and Latino caucuses who may have been with Hillary but are also really wedded to fundamental progressive values. So there's a solid, I would say at least 40% of the DNC that's progressive. I think this is probably only about 10% or 12% of the DNC that I'd say is more traditionally conservative old line Democrats. There's a lot of folks in the middle who are, good, proud liberals, not progressive, not necessarily comfortable with that word. But we can work with them on a lot of issues. I think there is a sense of change happening on the DNC. Whoever wins today, there's an awful lot of feeling that I hear talking to average members from all kinds of states, whoever they're aligned with for candidates. They want to see things change. They want to see more transparency. They want to see more openness. They want to see more opportunities for participation. And you see some of this stuff like around what's happening with the resolutions. Yesterday, the process got blown up because people weren't getting the communications. They weren't hearing, we didn't get the copies of the resolutions, so they were emailed to us 30 minutes into the meeting where they were already being discussed. And people said, no, stop this. That never would have happened before. And so there's this change to the business as usual attitude. And I think the new slate of officers who come in, whoever they are going to need to be, and from everything I've heard talking to all the candidates, will be responsive to that need for a much more engaged and transparent DNC in its operations and in its politics.
Real quick answer. Let's be real. There are a lot of people talking about leaving the party if Secretary Perez wins the race. Do you think that's going to happen?
I think it'd be a mistake if it does happen. I don't think there'll be DNC members leaving the party, but there are people I know in the grassroots who have got a lot invested in this race. My answer to them is, and I'm an enthusiastic Keith Ellison backer, is I'll be disappointed if Tom wins, but I want to give him a chance if he does. I want to make sure that he has the chance to prove to us that he's the progressive he says he is. I want to hold him accountable. I want to work with him to make a better party. And I urge people, take a breath. Let's try to make this work if that's the card we're dealt.
Thank you very much. Good
so
luck.
much.
Yeah. So, Jane, we're about to go sit down. You're a DNC member. I'm going to ask you a question that no one really wants to answer, but the reality is I think you're ballsy and have the right chutzpah for this. If Tom Perez wins, do you think people are going to flee the party?
I think it's going to be a major problem. I think you'll see on Twitter trending hashtag DemExit. I think it's not our responsibility to build that bridge. It's Perez's. And so we'll provide him the wood if that happens, but it's going to be a responsibility to build a bridge. But I think Ellison has the votes. I think it's going to be all up to Pete.
Thank you very much. All up to Pete. That's Pete Buttigieg, who is the mayor of South Bend, Indiana.